This is the piece that I really want to emphasize, developmental progression and approach to choosing a book. So at least in the US, and I don't know what it's like here, but we should read to your child, read to your baby. Reading means what you all do, you, particularly with a 3 and 4-year-old, you read a story and you'll talk back and forth. When we start saying that to mothers in the US particularly, and actually not just limited to those with a lesser education, but they take it literally, they read. Now, I don't know if any of you have tried reading to a 6-month-old, I mean reading a text, or a year-old child. What will they do? They're lost, they're not going to pay attention because it doesn't scaffold their attention. And so what we're looking for a better name, but it's really book sharing, and books become just a strategy for communicating affect and emotion, and communicating information, and communicating words. So what the young children need at 6 months to a year, books with with thick pages because they can turn those and they can't turn paper pages. They need pictures and faces, bright colors, common objects. You don't really need much text at all because it's just an object to talk about with your child, and pointing and naming. And I brought this along. I don't know why, but if someone wants to study infants, 6-month-olds love pictures of baby faces more than bicycles or cars or any other common object. They just get transfixed on babies' faces of different emotions. And you can just see that. Again, don't know why, it's not been studied, but almost anyone can tell you. So we even recommend to parents that this in some ways should be the first book, because if we tell parents to share a book and they don't have a good experience, like if they're reading and the child's like this, and unfortunately I have a video showing that, it's just not going to work. They're going to say, particularly people from other cultures are going to say, what are they talking about? He doesn't have any words, he doesn't understand things, they want me to read to him. Well, again, this is the goal. You need a book with these kind of things and these kind of characteristics. And the notion of reading aloud, again, depends on the age. Very early on, in the first 18 months, playing, pointing, and labeling. And then, certainly from 18 months, 2 years on, dialogic reading, back and forth, asking questions, the what, who, and when questions that you all are probably familiar with, and then storytelling, and sometimes reading the story as children get to be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4, depending on the particular child. And the other way to think about this is, instead of reading these instructions, what I tell parents is they should read their child. If for whatever reason the child's engaged and enjoying themselves, whatever they're doing works. But if the child's not engaged and not enjoying themselves, they have to think about strategies. Many parents just do it intuitively. They change the tone of their voice. They will, point to a different page. They'll do a bunch of things to keep the child engaged. If the child's engaged and enjoying themselves, these learning and important social communication is happening. If they're not, it's not an input system without affect and without attention. It's really critical. This is another way of saying the same thing, what we call a reading aloud pyramid, that from 6 to 12 months, it's really, again, emotional warmth and sharing. And I would suggest to you a couple things. Some of you, to think back maybe when you were a child, do you have a memory of cuddling up to your mother or father, and you can almost feel the texture of their sweater. You could smell them and their smell. You look up at their face from that downward movement, maybe see into their nose. It's a very poignant time. Short of breastfeeding, I can't think of anything else in the first couple of years as special as book sharing. It has that kind of power. The other thing, and may be true here, although I got a sense that you all are a little easygoing about time and being rushed, at least in the US and many other countries, if you read to your young child, it's unhurried time. It's hard to speed read a book to a 2-year-old. I mean, it's just not going to work. So this becomes special time for that. And that becomes really critical. And then obviously you can see at 15 months to 2 years, language plays an important part, but it builds on the emotional warmth and the sharing. Print recognition of letters and words, builds, and then the story. But I think if you keep this pyramid in mind, it's just a helpful, like all general things, to think about what you can and want to accomplish at certain ages. This is the one video where the father reads and it doesn't work. This slide, I will give you the short version of it, and that is, if you were going to go to a tech person these days and say, look, I want an object, I want it somewhat inexpensive, maybe $30, $40. I want it to stimulate a child's fine motor development, their attention, their language, their cognition, and their memory. Can you make me that? I would argue that's what a book is with a parent. With a parent. It really, when you really think of it that way, it is, a very special activity, and it elicits all those things that a child's development needs. For 12 to 24 months, again, board pages are important. Familiar objects are important. Something relevant to the child's life, if there's a story, going out for a walk in the woods, seeing cars on the road, something that they can relate to. And then asking questions, to a parent, to a child about any of those things. The rhyming words and alliteration, I'm going to get back to, again, shape or animal focused, repeating, expanding, naming, and questioning, you all know that. Is Goodnight Moon a book you all have? Yeah, I think the rhyming and alliteration, and I'll just read a few pages. I'll just read a few pages of it, and unfortunately I have it in here, but things got out of order, so you'll just have to listen. But one of its special attributes is the rhyming and alliteration. So you can even take an 18-month-old and stop mid-sentence and they can complete it. It's almost as if they've mastered reading, because the rhyming and alliteration allows them to remember those words. So I'll just read a couple pages. In the great green room, there was a telephone and a red balloon and a picture of the cow jumping over the moon. And there were 3 little bears sitting on chairs, and 2 little kittens, and a pair of mittens, and a little toy house, and a young mouse. Very simple rhyming, alliteration, and it goes on from there. The other thing that I've come to appreciate, and I have gotten a sense that your children's books in this country is also pretty special, as opposed to some other countries where I've been to, where there's some thought, some artistry, some poetry are really put into it, which I think is important. Is besides the rhyming and alliteration, I always felt that the color aspects of this book were special. The red and the green and the yellow, the colors go together. So you have this very powerful, evocative image that children really love, and you can see it as a piece of art. So from 2 to 3 years, paper pages, because children's fine motor can start, handling that. They have a pincer grasp that can pull apart the pages. Again, rhyming words are important. Focused on routines, which they're familiar with, whether it's going to bed, whether it's eating. Again, relevant to a child's life. And the last 2 more advanced themes, and emphasize sound and letters. In the U.S., again, thinking about less educated parents, they're pretty good these days at naming and pointing letters, because that seems to be something they realize is important, but not about phonetics and not about sound blending. To saying the sound, you have to learn the name of the letter. That's a B, but it's a B. And children, at least in the U.S., the 4 to 5-year-olds, you know, they're not good at it because they haven't had that kind of experience. And you need more experience than you can get that kind of instruction in groups in school. And, you know, that's where, in my experience, the children really fall behind when they enter school. They just do not have, you know, the sound blending and the sounds that are necessary for reading. And then while some children are reading, they're still struggling with the sounds, and that's when things go south because they get frustrated. It's not enjoyable. They're not successful, and these other kids are, and things go on from there. Just 2 videos we took from our clinic. I thought this mother sort of instructive in her own way, very powerfully. And I've been thinking a lot about presenting, I think the way as educators and doctors, how we present information to parents is not the most engaging. We're very good at talking about facts, what you should do, what child's brain does, what their development does. We give them the facts, what they should do. And for most of us, if I'll put you in a position of going to a doctor, when they give you the fact stuff, you may be interested, but most likely you're probably not because it's just not engaging. So the question is, how do we better as professionals, particularly engage parents, if we want them to take away something from what we're saying? And one of the things I've learned is this notion of emotional engagement that you can do with videos. And the other thing is identity and belonging, which is part of your work, Natalia. If mothers see mothers like themselves hearing something, they'll say, well, if she knows that, I should know that. If they see someone else like a talking head expert, it's debatable. The other thing I've learned, because I'm working with public television now to make some videos for parents, and is that humor is good to include, and music. So emotionally engaging videos of faces and voices of who your audience is going to be, which also means that you may need more than one. But let's watch this if I can get this one going. So the mother's modeling this, I thought, perfectly. And this was just spontaneous. I didn't.
Yeah, puppy.
That's great.
Good job. Puppy.
Yeah, let her, whatever you want her to do.
Let's open it up and see what's out. Now it's 3 puppies. You see? Now let's go to the next page. Here you go. And what are those? Those are ducks? Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And like all mothers know how to
7 ducks.
engage your
Good
other
job.
children at different ages
Let's go
into
to the next page.
doing activities, which can be hard work. Let's see if I can get the next one.
As I am showing my daughter the pictures here and hoping that she will repeat what I say. She's 2 years old, so she should be talking more, but she's not very verbal. But she will repeat what someone tell her to say. So if I do that, I'm hoping that she will talk more in a sense and give us some synthesis, because she doesn't do synthesis at all.
That's perfect. My editorial.
As I am
Well, I went into the clinic and I didn't know what to expect, and she's a real ringer. This mother, I was right on target. For 3-year-olds, again, this is getting into your territory, and I don't need to say much about folk tales and legends, alphabet and counting books, exercise the child's imagination, and books children can choose. These are, in some ways, to sum up this notion of engagement while reading, let alone any other activity. This is what an engaged mother, you see that joint attention. Remember, joint attention starts at around 6 months of age. It's not fully developed, but between 6 months and a year, it can happen. This actually reminds me, remember the still face with the pointing that went on? My colleague in Boston, Meredith Rowe, had published a paper about a year ago that pointing at 18 months, the gestures actually, wasn't pointing, it was all kinds of gestures, was more associated with language acquisition at 5 years than the number of words the child had, which I think when you think cross-culturally, it's sort of understandable because many cultures there's not a lot of talking, but in most cases mothers are pretty responsive. You know, a child does this and the mother touches the face, so that's really communication, and it's different than language per se, but it's building on the same reciprocity, probably some of the same circuits, and then you just build in the language. And so I thought that was a pretty important finding. So this is what engagement would look like. This is what lack of engagement looks like. And this is one, you know, maybe mixed. Child looks like she's paying attention, but the mother is using her hands and not her face. But these are the kind of things you see. And when you can watch mothers, you know, with this in mind, and you can get a good idea which ones, and most mothers aren't taught this. They just, they know their goal is to get the child's attention, so they'll scaffold, again, their voice or the pages or anything to keep doing that. But for others, you know, the question is, how do we, I hate to use the word teach, but I guess I have to. And I think videos, like I'm talking about, is the way to go. And without a big, heavy lecture, but the modeling, in my experience, mothers watch what other mothers are doing, and they see something, and that's one of the ways that they learn without the heavy hitting, you know, lectures that we're all good at.